Question follows on from points made by Deputies Wallace and MacDonald earlier in relation to the procurement process. Obviously, the government spends billions annually on goods and services and capital expenditure. I note you've said to the other deputies that you know there are problems and you're working on it, but the reality is that it's going to be too late for many small Irish businesses because of the bias that's there towards big business at the moment. And I'm wondering what impact or assessment you've carried out to look at the scale of that.
Thank you, Minister.
So, a number of points. Number one, I reject absolutely that there's any bias in relation to big business. If there was, if the deputy has any evidence of it, it would be unlawful, both under Irish domestic law and European law. So I advise the deputy, if she has any information in relation to manifest bias in that regard, she should notify the Gardaí as a matter of urgency. Public procurement, as you know, is governed by European and national rules. We aim, and the aim of the whole system is to procure open, competitive and non-discriminatory procurement. I think most deputies in the House who've spoken on this issue today indicate that the establishment of the Office of Government Procurement is a breath of fresh air. The first time we have real data, the first time we know who's buying what at what cost. We know the criteria that are brought into place. What I've said to people who ask similar questions is that, of course, there's room for improvement. For example, we're looking at the whole procurement process all the time, and the TAS process will be reviewed next month to ensure that any complaints that have been received, as I've indicated to the House previously, there's been 27, 24, there's been 27 have been received to date that are fully acted upon, that concerns from any small firm is addressed, that a real capacity is given to the SME sector to ensure that they win public contracts. They do. 2/3 of public contracts are already won by the SME sector, and the overwhelming majority of contracts in volume and in monetary value terms are won by companies within this state. And that's all good. But of course we can do better. And having a transparent, open state process that people can look at and interact with, I think, is an enormous step forward. I hope, as I said to other deputies, to be in a position to bring legislation before the House establishing the OGP on a statutory basis, and we can, I think, address these matters in some detail when we're looking at that.
About Deputy Clare Daly.
Well, the Minister knows well that there are huge problems in this area, and the bias, while it may not be specific, comes from the manner in which the contracts are constructed and the reality as a result that small and micro businesses end up being unfairly disadvantaged. And the proof of that is that we do have Irish manufacturers who previously maybe made uniforms for state services, people who provided the school books and so on, businesses that were there for decades are no longer there. And much of that business has gone to international corporations. Now, it's frankly wrong, Minister, when you say that 66% of public service expenditure is with SMEs. That is not correct. The reality on the ground is that 97% of Ireland's small businesses have less than 50 employees. You count an SME for this purpose as a company with up to 250 employees. That's not a small and medium-sized business. So there are problems there. And what the small and medium businesses are spelling out is it's the manner in which the contracts are constructed. The idea of saying, sure lads, get it all together and you can all pretend that you're a big company isn't going to work for companies that naturally compete with each other. And how come other countries can organise contracts to benefit their own type of businesses? For example, in Germany, all German trains are made by Siemens. Why can't we organise our contracts in Ireland to benefit the types of business that predominate here, which are small and medium-sized ones?
I don't think we build trains in Ireland, but SMEs, there's a European definition that we, for comparative reasons, obviously subscribe to. And it is that when we break it down, micro businesses with up to 10 employees, small businesses with up to 50, medium-sized businesses are up to 250, and larger companies are over 250. It is a fact that under the SME definition, that 2/3 of the goods and services tendered for are won by SMEs in the state. We can't discriminate against larger companies. I think bluntly, If a company in Ireland is employing 200 people or 250 people, does the deputy want to exclude them from winning state contracts? Is there some sort of magic number, 50, and if you're 51, you don't get a state contract? So that would be a ludicrous proposal to make. In relation to, you quote books, for example. I mean, I looked at what happened before we had the centralised Office of Government Procurement. And individual schools were tendering for books. And the same company was supplying the same products to a variety of schools at different cost. We also have to have some regard to value for money and the taxpayer. And we bring that discipline in a transparent way to play in the OGP process. And as I say, of course there's room for improvement, and that's something we'll continue to work on.
Clare Daly.
We see here really is kind of neoliberalism unleashed. The reality is that the centralisation of these... Well, I'm explaining to you, if you could button it for a bit, you might listen.
Daly.
The centralisation of these contracts has resulted in the de facto exclusion of small and medium-sized businesses. Fact. The employers that make up the majority of employment prospects for Irish citizens. And the point that I'm making is that other EU countries have managed to manage the EU rules to protect their own employers. You yourself, Minister, have been found wanting, and the government, by imposing the turnover limit on companies, the European Commission has found that you wrongly excluded SMEs from competing, for example, for the Aircom contract. And what businesses are saying here is that many of them can tender for this work. Large companies are tendering, and then the actual work is contracted out after that. And I think the very fact that you haven't done a comprehensive analysis on the companies that used to be there before you came to office and are no longer there is something that is lacking and is failing to inform.
Minister, to conclude. Minister.
Yeah, I noticed that the SME that the deputy instances in Germany is Siemens, tiny little company with hundreds of thousands of employees, hardly the typical SME that you want to win contracts. As I've said, we have facilitated to the OGP all SMEs in the state to fully involve themselves in the tendering process. We meet the buyers' processes. We've direct seminars with potential employers. We have a website. We give training in terms of tendering, which is absolutely new, never happened in terms of state procurement until the Office of Government Procurement was established. Virtually everybody in the House, except the current deputies asking a question, welcomes the OGP. And she probably wants to go back to a situation where we know who is buying what and at what cost.
Thank you.